Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. Welcome back to another One Piece review. This time we're covering manga chapter 1178. So Oda was sparing no expenses on following up on what he said at Jump Festa, when he said the pacing will be a lightning fast pacing we've never seen before, and we'll be wrapping up Elbaph within this year. Looks like we'll be wrapping up Elbaph before the end of spring apparently, because boy, talk about an anticlimactic ending to this fight, which barely lasted a chapter. I get it, like, there's no reason to drag this out. I can definitely see this having mixed feelings, even though I guess technically we should be shocked. But you can't take it away from Oda. He's doubling down on what he said at Jump Festa. So there's a bunch of news to go over as far as like Elbaph outside of the manga. We got some interesting details about the anime, as well as some interesting details about the One Piece remake. Some word on the status of the One Piece remake, so I'll go over that, but I'm going to save that for the end. Let's start off with this chapter. Speaking of Elbaph, start off with the cover page, and we got Eustace Kid being chased by a raging bull. I'd like to know what he did to be chased by a bull, or why he's running away from a bull. All this does is like confirm the fact, are we going to see Kid again before the end of Elbaph? Because last time we checked, he was crushed by Shanks on Elbaph, and he was sinking into the water, but the last time I checked, so did Luffy and Big Mom on Wano. I can't see Kid being killed off this way, especially with like not even giving us a Kid backstory. But I wonder if we're going to get to see Kid before the end of the arc. So that's something else I think people need to keep in mind here. I know Oda said it's a lightning fast pacing, but that doesn't mean the arc's over with just yet. Speaking of which, the chapter starts with Nami, Frankie, Sanji and Jinbei being greeted by Luffy, who's bringing Usopp and Brook back to them, because obviously they're nowhere near in the condition to help out here. So Luffy's like bringing them back. Luffy's like, take care of them. I like how Frankie's like, do you need a hand with this? Luffy's like, if things get worse, probably best to keep your distance, because Loki is going on the warpath. He's attacking, which is pretty much cue for like the anime to include. So the fight's already starting. So this is where the anime fills in the fine points. So obviously we're going to get to see that possibly in the anime. Meanwhile, Loki is in his Needhog form, is having trouble landing the attack on Gunko because he's too damn big and the size difference. So obviously Gunko's going to dodge that shit. Plus, it doesn't help that Loki's just spamming lightning blast breath, and Gunko's able to dodge that with ease. But Luffy comes in, he says, I'm going to be the one that blows you away. As it turns out, neither of them do. I'll get to that shortly. But meanwhile, you got Gunko hovering above, and she's talking about a rumor of a creature being sighted. Obviously talking about the Needhog form of Loki. Loki again, reference to the fact she's too damn tiny. Where's she at? Then Luffy comes in, but before he can attack, actually Emu comes out from Gunko's body. Pause. Emu is separated from Gunko's body here. And I mean, this is done for like plot purposes. But Emu's trying to use reverse dummy on Luffy and Loki, even though it has no effect whatsoever. So that's actually the biggest predictable outcome here. And even Emu says, oh, as I expected. So reverse dummy doesn't work on Luffy and Loki, so you don't have to worry about rage baiting people with this. No, it's not going to have an effect on Luffy, on Loki, as far as we're concerned. Now, I kind of wonder if it's going to have any impact on any of the Straw Hats if Emu tries to pull this. But this just gives Luffy the opening to use Gama Gama no Don Gatling in Gear 5th. Lands an attack on Emu and obliterates Emu's body, but I'm pretty sure Emu's going to do just fine. But then in comes Loki, and he reverts to his normal form, in his base form, and he attacks with the Ragnar. But he uses Niflheim. Of all the attacks that Oda can come up with, he has him use Niflheim, the only attack that freezes their opponents. Gee, how convenient. Even though technically you got Emu separated from Gunko at this point in time. So I'll get to this in a second, but that pretty much ends the fight. And it confirms it ends the fight, because after this, Luffy reverts back to normal because he's maxed out. So we go to elsewhere on Elbaph, and really this is like wrapping up all the loose ends in the battle on Elbaph. So this is wrapping up the battle. We got Nami and Jinbei taking care of the fires. You got Chopper being greeted by Zoro, talking about because apparently Zoro just witnessed what Chopper did in the previous chapter, striking Concantanio in the head, and that sent him back to normal and reversed the effects of reverse Idami. Now, there's a gag in the beginning with Zoro saying, oh, maybe it's because you're a good doctor, and Chopper being like the typical, or I'm not happy at all because you praised me. But really, this is like kind of teasing, in my opinion, Chopper's like Devil Fruit Awakening, because what else could it be at this point? Especially considering where we're at in the story. So yeah, it is about time that a lot of the Straw Hats do get teased getting a power-up, considering a lot of them didn't get it here. And Brooke, which I feel is the next person to get a power-up, by the way. So this basically just wraps up the loose ends in the battle. The fires get put out. Of course they do. The giants get set to normal. So everything's hunky-dory. We go to the Owl Library where Sol and Robin notice the library is pretty much, it was on fire, but the books, they're gone. Like, and so's Biblo, the owl. So there's no sign of the books. The shelves are completely empty, including the books of O'Hara, by the way. Now, Biblo's gone, along with the books. Robin says, what if he escaped with the books? I hope that's the case, but where is Biblo now? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the books from O'Hara gigantified by Biblo, who supervises the Owl Library? So it's not like small books we're talking about here. There's like giant-sized books being removed from the library. I could have sworn I mentioned, oh, I see the books being totally fine, considering that relevant to the plot, and of course they are, and otherwise Oda won't be focusing on this. And I said this a couple of reviews ago, so this is just like teasing what's to come. It may lead into the finale of Elbaph, which I'll get to in a second. But we go to the Holy Knights, and it's pretty much confirmed that even though Gunko's frozen solid, none of the Holy Knights are killed off. Like, we see St. Gillingham still in the state he's in, headless. We see Sanji and Frankie talking about the Holy Knights and the devastation they caused. We go to the Western Village where we see the Earth's Castle, and we see a headless knight named Saint Summers. So Saint Summers technically is still alive. Great. I mean, I could have sworn I mentioned either we'll see Saint Summers again, either on Elbaph or he's sent away from Elbaph. So obviously Oda couldn't resist keeping him around. And apparently the heart's on the ground, beating, by the way. Saint Summers is able to put his head together along with his heart. Weird as fuck, considering he doesn't have a body right now. I guess we'll see what happens with Saint Killing, because he may get taken as a hostage. Well, you got Luffy. If there's any chance to counterattack, now's it, because Luffy is maxed out due to using Gear 5. I guess he was clowning around too much, or Oda decided to. He teased enough to like not give us the full fight. Like really, if you technically think about it, this was so anticlimactic, it's not even funny. Just the way that everything turned out. You got Gunko turned to ice. By the way, even though Imu's encapsulated in ice, Luffy maxed out thinking about food, and I think he's even out Rataskia. So typical Luffy. But meanwhile, this gives Imu the chance to like dip and get back to Murajoa. And did you notice outside of Murajoa, outside of Pangaea Castle, we got rubble, broken rubble. I think Oda referenced that for a reason, considering the last time we got any mention of Murajoa, the Holy Land, it was in the Sea of Flames. We got Imu in the Chamber of Flowers in the Flower Room, telling the Gorosei, hey, I'm going to take a temporary field trip. I'm going to dip. So basically, Imu just says, we got Imu basically saying to the Gorosei, Mu shall withdraw from the Holy Land for a brief period of time, temporarily, but he decides to give us the caption, is Imu's destination that place? No subtlety whatsoever from Oda. Like, gee, I wonder what he could be referring to. I'll get to that in a second, but that's how Oda decides to end the chapter. Cut back to what I said about Robin and Sol's situation, because we got Biblo on the run with the books, apparently finding a way to get the books. Now, this is either leading to one or two things. Either one, those books are placed elsewhere in Elbaph, so the only two things that come to mind is inside the tree, which I also talked about, maybe that has something to do with the Rob Poneglyph, or, and I mentioned this in my last review as well, considering Oda decided to mention in the live action adaptation how the giants were prey to the sun god at the top of Elbaph, and I mentioned this, maybe this is setting us up to like go to the top of Elbaph to wrap up the arc. I don't know. We also got the Harley mural to like, if that's going to be a payoff to that, we'll have to wait and see where Oda goes with that. He could just like, no. I gave you enough. you're gonna find the rest out by the time the series wraps itself up. I could see Oda doing that. It's either inside the tree or it's at the top of the tree, because unless that owl is pretty much a spy, that'd be a kind of a plot twist, and that gives Robert an incentive to like find the books, considering some of those books are from O'Hara. That could be a possibility. Those are the only two that come to mind here, but yeah, I'm leaning towards there being on a different location on Elbaph that we haven't been to yet. To me, the biggest reveal because it's going to push the finale forward. Either it's going to be related to how this arc wraps up, or it's going to lead into the next arc. But then again, we don't even know if the Holy Knights are going to be the only outsiders that come into Elbaph. There's still time for someone else to show up, especially if the Royal Poneglyph is there. And I mentioned Kid earlier. Like I said this from the very beginning, from the beginning of time, since we learned that Shanks was taking on Kid on Elbaph. Why Elbaph if it's not related to the plot? Remember what Shanks told Ben Beckham back at Wano. It's time we go to claim the One Piece. Why would you go to Elbaph if that's the case, unless it's not tied to it? This chapter could give up a lot of mixed feelings, because on the one hand, yeah, it's super fast pacing and it's like, get this fight over with. I can see some people feeling that way, but I could also see some people feeling this is super anticlimactic. After all this build up, this is what we get. Now I get it, Oda's like ramping up the pacing because he has to, but yeah, considering the fact you took 4 years to give us the conclusion of Wano, the fact that Dressrosa is longer than Elbaph, and it's going to be apparently longer than Elbaph, is ridiculous. And the fact that Oda pretty much mentioned, oh, is Emu's destination that place? Gee, where else could he be talking about? Considering the fact he also mentioned at Jump Fest that, oh, we'll be going to the island that Roger found. Unless it's like, okay, I need to regroup, I need to go elsewhere. Unless he knows that somebody's heading for Laughdale. So that's the only thing that comes to mind here. I mean, where else in the One Piece world, in the final saga, could Emu be heading? Like, is he going to go back to Elbaph at this stage? But other than that, it's like, what else could Emu do at this point? And where could Emu go at this point? Plus, you also have the Vivi factor as well. Trying to go after Vivi's location. Or maybe Vivi runs into the Straw Hats. I said that too. That's a possibility. So that was a chapter, a very simplistic one. I can see why Oda did this, because he wasn't going to kill off Gunko, because we need the Gunko and Brook backstory. He wasn't going to defeat Emu flat out, because technically Emu would have recovered anyway. And you couldn't have Luffy or Lucky lose after hyping them up for like as long as you did. So there was only really a one outcome. So I can see that aspect from Oda. Like, there's no really alternative. But considering how long you took to build up this confrontation, and Oda could tie this back up to what Loki told Luffy: "Hey, if you help me out, I'll help you wipe out any pirate group you want." And Oda gave us the dialogue to Loki. Fighting this big was like too much of a drawback. No shit. He also mentions that going in base form using Nifel, the only attack that uses ice, by the way, to freeze an opponent, was the quickest way to resolve this. If that wasn't Oda projecting what he wanted to say to everybody else without using Loki, I don't know what else to tell you. So speaking of Elbaph, we got some news on the anime as well as the manga. So we got some anime visual designs for the new Giant Warrior Pirates for Elbaph, even though technically we've seen a bunch of them already, but this is just hyping us up for the Elbaph stage of this arc. I'm calling it pre-Elbaph because until we actually get to Elbaph itself, that, in my opinion, that's where the arc actually really begins. And we've also got Netflix confirming themselves that they are going to be airing Elbaph as well. I mean, colour me shocked, even though there's a lot of arcs they haven't added to the catalogue on Netflix, but this is them just wanting a piece of the pie, since it's going to be the new thing in town when it comes to One Piece, so they want to hop on that, they want to jump on that. So this was the most predictable outcome, which is funny because on Easter Sunday, Elbaph begins in the anime. One Piece really begins anew. It's really a beginning of a new era, because for the first time it will hit a seasonal format. Speaking of the One Piece anime and what's old is new, we did get some details on the status of the One Piece remake, and we still don't know when it's due to arrive on Netflix. But what we do know is George Wada, the CEO of Witch Studios, who's in charge of the One Piece remake, made this statement. Is basically George Wada saying the One Piece remake will have flawless pacing, more denser and more impactful with unnecessary stretching. So in other words, without any filler, with less filler. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but some of the filler in One Piece is kind of like a hidden gem. So, but I get why they're going with this. It's the Dragon Ball Z Kai route. The only difference is it's not done by Toei Animation, the same studio that did Dragon Ball Z. It's like done by a completely different studio. This is something that Oda mentioned in the initial statement. Like, there's going to be this is going to reach a new audience, but at the same time, it's going to have a new feeling for those who've watched the original anime. And I mentioned after that statement that it could be possible that what we get from the live action version could translate into this One Piece remake. So I wouldn't be surprised. And like I mentioned in my last review, when it comes to like One Piece Season 2, how they included scenes like included Bartolomeo in the Logtown episode. Like, we didn't get to see that in the original anime, so I can see them doing that with the One Piece remake. Incorporating what they did with the live action, making it still like faithful to the original content, but giving us splices of like scenes like that to make it a new experience. I can see them doing that. The other thing that stood out to me in this statement was when George was like referencing Oda's regret because of how One Piece originally aired, how it's in 4.3 aspect ratio, and it never reached a modern style technology to start off with. And a lot of people criticize like the original anime, the way it looked at the beginning, is like that was one of the biggest critiques of One Piece, like why people couldn't get into it until they actually did and realized it's not the art style that drew them in. But that's my response. I can see why Oda feels that way, but really, if it doesn't start the way it did, no room for progression. There's no way to tell like if there's progression in the story. What matters is the story itself and not how it looks. Also, you're talking in hindsight here because the animation and the way technology was when One Piece first started is way different from what it is now. It's a far cry from what it is now. So, of course, you're talking in hindsight of, oh, I would like modern day technology to like exist within the original One Piece. Yeah, it'd be nice to go back in time to take what you have and apply it there. We can't do that. And if One Piece doesn't start the way it does, like I said before, there's no room for progression. And to me, it's not about the art style. What matters to me is the story itself. And the art style does go a long way, but I don't think a lot of people have a problem with that. It's like it's just the way of the times it was back then. But to me, I don't think that's something to regret, honestly, because if it wasn't for that, look at where we're at now. And One Piece was popular even before we even got to Wano, and the way that animation changed from that. Like, One Piece was already popular because of the story itself. Yeah, it goes a long way, but it's not the end-all be-all. I think you're taking for granted the way that what the anime had to work with back then, and you also take it away from the voice actors. Like, me personally, I wouldn't have changed a thing. That was a statement that I made about One Piece remake. I'll give you my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. And let me know what you think about this chapter overall. Did you think the ending to this fight, if you want to call it that, was anticlimactic as hell? I personally think so, but I understand why Oda chose to go this route. So that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think down below. If you enjoyed this video, you guys have to do with a thumbs up. I appreciate all your support. Catch you guys later. Thanks, guys. Bye.